think everybody is thinking about agentic implementation, risks, all of that. And Eugene, I'm going to start with you. When we were like trading emails before this, you wrote that for agentic automation to work economically, you need real benefits, seems quite reasonable, and bounded costs, because unbounded seems not good. Are we there? Are we close to there?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. What I was talking about is, there's a huge amount of investment and like potential in automation, right? Especially of like core business kind of like operations and processes by leveraging kind of AI. And one of the challenges is, they work some of the time, but you're not quite sure when they won't work. And when they don't work, what we've seen empirically is they can violate like legal regulations, they could delete data. There's a lot of kind of like side effects beyond simply the text that they generate that can impose risk. And one of the challenges is if the risk potentially could occur, then the perceived risk is actually also very high too. Because for adoption to happen, the value needs to be there and also reliably there, but also you need to make sure that you're not going to have any potential kind of like side effects or risks that can really affect your business. And one of the things that we see is that things are not there, right? You can prompt the agents harder. You can build kind of all these edifices around it and use LLMs to double check what the LLMs are doing and so on. But fundamentally, this AI is imperfect. And so using imperfect mechanisms to check for quality and safety is very, very difficult, right? And so, one of our research agendas here at Columbia is to think about, well, what's the next kind of like data systems, next cloud infrastructure, next computing infrastructure that the environment itself that the agent is interacting within can provide that safety, right? That you can't rely on the LLMs to inherently provide. So that's one of the big challenges we see towards really large-scale adoption at the level of, say, database adoption today, right? Like databases are the foundation of all business today, right? And one of the reasons they are is because they just will not lose your data, right? They will not corrupt your data unless you do the wrong thing and write the wrong query and ask it to do bad things, right? And so we need that kind of like reliability at large scale for the kind of large-scale adoption that we hope to see.
We'll get to some of the specific problems that we've seen with Agentic. But first, let me just ask, either in your business or if you're a student personally, raise your hand if you have done any work or played around with Agentic, with an agent. Oh, I would give that a 60, 70%, right? That's a lot. That's a lot. So, Brittany, at Accenture, you work with all different companies, and I wonder what you see. Like, are companies going 100 miles an hour towards agentic AI? Are they encountering barriers and hurdles? And if so, like, what are those barriers that they're hitting?
It definitely is very focused in certain verticals and industry-wise. Life sciences, financial services are the two industries which are the widest adopters of
life sciences
and financial services.
Okay, got it.
So we're talking pharma, we're talking banking, and these are the areas that we are far beyond. We're 12 months out from any POCs which they started with. We're now in full-blown production environments where agents are part of core workflows and scaling even just beyond workflows into a wide array of use cases. So that's been the two most exciting industries from an adoption standpoint.
Ranjan, let me follow up on that and feel free to talk about the industries that Brittany talked about. But one of the things I noticed was a few months ago, Walmart said, we're going all in on chatbots to help you make purchases. And my question was, is there a big gap when you think about agentic between, there's certain things that are not like mission critical necessarily, advising somebody on what t-shirt they should buy, right? Is very different from stock market trades or doing something with their financial information or their health information. And so I just wonder if you see a kind of gap between either the industries that are using it or maybe, to Brittany's point, what they're using it for.
Yeah, so I'm Ranjan Roy. I'm the VP for Retail and Consumer at Ryder. So I'm biased towards the retail and consumer marketing verticals. And where we see, exactly as you said, these industries are moving very quickly because it's recommending a t-shirt in many cases. So that's not the most life-threatening thing. So you can be experimental, so you can start to take chances. But on the security conversation, to us, the most interesting tension we're seeing is who owns security, is the idea that traditionally IT owns cybersecurity. And then for the past number of years, IT has owned AI budgets and essentially owned AI programs. But more and more, the business side, business users are going to be driving and building these workflows. So who is going to actually be responsible? I believe it's going to be actually one of the most interesting opportunities of the next few years, that there's something in the middle that we have not figured out what the name is, what the profile is, but someone who understands kind of both sides and is able to kind of understand and drive the security posturing of all this.
So you talked about the t-shirt, we talked about the t-shirt example. Do you feel like in more high stakes, I mean, and you can feel free to jump in on this too, Brittany, but like in more high stakes, more regulated, more real serious, you get the wrong t-shirt, whatever,
Yeah.
right? That you get the wrong diagnosis, not whatever. So do you feel like you're seeing a real gap in
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And that's where even within retail and consumer, like beauty has a higher threshold because there's health considerations and regulation versus apparel. Sustainable apparel has more regulation than unsustainable apparel. So there's this hierarchy there. Then going into, and what excites me about it is like the way things get built there is what I think is going to then influence in much more regulated areas. And we even see that internally. FinServ and life sciences are the two other big verticals, and kind of the work we're doing over on the retail side will then transfer over to what customers in more regulated areas are doing.
Did you want to add anything? Or?
When we think about safety and chatbots, it's always been the output. You're concerned about the output. Now when we think about agents, it's the action that these agents are taking on behalf of the organization, the company, the user, whomever it is that is orchestrating, whoever it is that owns that harness that we were talking about this morning. And this is a whole nother topic, but a very exciting one. And I think that companies are starting to be, like Walmart, for example, they're thinking about ChatGPT or whatever other model whatever other UI that you're using. What is the action? How are they going to recommend my product? And that is something for many businesses, especially in Ranjan's vertical of retail, that keeps them up at night. I think we've kind of figured it out, would you say? We've been talking a lot about intelligence in the agentic AI space, and I think it's a very solvable problem, and it's all about being able to boil down what matters most to your customer journey. But what do you think about the intelligence layer of the safety and agentic AI?
Yeah, I think a lot has been done in this space, and but again, and we were talking earlier about the type of research that's being done here, the type of work. There's still a lot to figure out, and again, who owns it? What are the actual ways you're evaluating is an output or is a process good or not? To me, one of the more kind of like fascinating things is in the past, security was more about stopping bad actors from getting in. And now you're basically saying like every agentic workflow is going to be going out, coming back in. Like the complexity of it is just definitely compounding.
Speaking of the complexity compounding, Joe, I wonder how if somebody's in a company, they're like, yes, I want to incorporate agents. I guess, how do you know that they can be trustworthy? Or are we maybe just not there yet where you can't know?
Yeah, so I think that's why everyone these days are talking about harness, right? Evaluations and testing are the very important research area and also a tool layer
Can you
that people
talk
are
about
investing in.
what the harness is?
So it's more about what can we give like the agents more of these kind of guardrails, and a harness is a way that you can, within certain environments, certain actions are safe to do, and there is always a safety check before you do things. So a lot of times what we're looking into is because agents are very different from traditional softwares, right? Right now, we think about agents as it's a natural language input. So the inputted space is so much bigger, right? So it's a permutation of all possible words in different languages and combined. So it's very hard to know how your end users are going to use your agent in the first place. Therefore it's very hard to enumerate all possible things to test your agents for. So I think a lot of our work in research and also in production is working on simulations. How can we simulate end users' behaviors in order for testings? And there is also a lot of things that Eugene and I have been working on is how to do sandbox things. How do we do better system size? Like we can do branchings so that there is always a way to go back, right? How do we make sure that we sandbox and prove all these very critical systems? So nowadays we see a lot of read-only systems. We can read your product catalog, so we can answer questions of your product catalog. But if I wanted to return your product, which includes the write process of your database, then we have a lot of concerns with it.
Okay.
I think that the system or on the algorithm side had to be jointly improving in order to provide that trust. So the end customers, which is these enterprises or companies, can safely adopt these technologies.
Eugene, there was a fascinating report from Scale back in November. It was written about an IEEE spectrum, and I'm going to quote it to you. Somewhat realistic pressures, such as looming deadlines, which I'm sure everybody has encountered, dramatically increase rates of misbehavior. Now, I would guess nobody wants an agent that's misbehaving, but that seems like, when you talk about testing things out and like simulating behavior, I wonder if it's hard to understand the entire spectrum of like, oh, agents misbehave when the deadline is looming. They try to figure out, ways around things. I wonder like what your take on that is.
Yeah, I think, like when I think about agent automation, right, and I think about agents in general, very similar properties hold in traditional applications, right? If you build like a web app, right, you can do validation and stuff in the application to check, oh, did you have a bad password, right? Or do you have a duplicate username? But you don't check it in the application for safety purposes, right? You check it for usability purposes to tell the user, hey, like, this is like this username already exists. Like the system, right? The database does the actual check and enforcement, right? That's where safety happens. And I think for agents, that's kind of like how it's probably a good idea to think about it, right? The agents you can't rely on to do the correct thing. And so the system needs to provide these guardrails, right? So Joe talked about one, which is this notion of sandboxing. Today's sandboxes basically are kind of toy in the sense that they start in some environment that someone set up, and then you kind of like can play around inside of it, right? Or you buy a Mac Mini and say like, just run within that, and it is whatever the OS starts in. But what you want for automation is it should be running on your data, right? In your production environment, but safely, right? Which means, okay, well, your computer, right, your laptop should be able to say, I'm going to checkpoint, right? Allow the agent to do stuff, and then be able to roll back and try something else. Because what we've seen empirically is that these agents cannot do things perfectly the first time. They need to do trial and error, right? And if the computing environment doesn't support that, then there's no possibility of that being able to happen. Right, so that's one example of kind of like where it's not purely an AI or kind of agent development problem, and it's not purely a systems problem. And kind of like that's why two different disciplines have to work together.
This is a great audience question, and anybody can answer it. What does human in the loop realistically look like at scale when deploying agents? And I would add to that if you talk to people, I feel like people I've talked to who work in tech companies, I think they would argue that in some ways, though people might give lip service to the idea of keeping a human in the loop, part of what they're trying to do is take the human out of the loop, right? Because it slows things down. So like, tell me what you think.
So I would say, yeah, saying human in the loop is something that is often done in order to bring comfort. I mean, I'm serious, but where we have actually seen it, like truthfully, and this is a good thing, is the work that people are going to do moves upstream. So for example, you take any kind of retail workflow. In the past, creating that last bit of output, 5 people having to manually review it, 1 for different types of compliance, putting a task into a project management, all that work, you do not need like already we're seeing get completely, I like saying agentified instead of automated. It sounds not like automated, because there's more like intelligence in it, I would say. But then the work of how do we create these compliance agents, there's a lot of work there, and working directly with the compliance teams to create different, like one with a large consumer brands company, like one for new MAHA regulation, one for caffeine regulation, one for juice regulation, like creating those skills so they can be applied in a reliable way. There's a lot of work, it's a lot more creative, and it's a lot less repetitive and rote. So to me, all that starts to move upstream, which I think is more interesting work, but is definitely different.
I think that we're already getting into jobs here. I can already smell it. I think that there's this idea, and the way that I talk to our forward deployed engineering team is that I think eventually we start to become managers of these agents. We are all observing the evals, observing the observability of our servers that these agents are interacting with. So I think that this human in the loop, or as the Accenture CEO likes to say, Julie Sweet, human in the lead, it has become more important, and we will get more information and more data about how our agents are interacting versus today, which is traditionally all about the output that you get to see, more intrinsically about how is the person that is the human in the lead or the human in the loop observer, how do they perceive the value of the agent, of the interaction with the agent, of the interactions of the context that is the part of the output. I agree. I think that it's going upstream, and I think that it will become even more important as more people adopt agents and use agents as part of their workflows.
Since you brought it up, let me ask a question about jobs over here, because I wonder, when you think about this idea of human in the loop or human in the lead, the ability to kind of have oversight over something, I wonder to what degree people still need technical skills. Like, if you were trying to proofread a memo and it was written in English, if you didn't know how to read English, AI could have written it for you, but your ability to understand whether it conveyed what you wanted to convey would be non-existent. And so, we've obviously, people talk a lot about vibe coding, and that is happening, but is your sense that there's still like a lot of demand for technical skills in this sort of proofreading version of
Definitely.
things? Yeah.
So there is a popular word we usually use in machine learning that we call alignment. Is the model's behavior aligned with your thinking, right? So a lot of times you have to tell the model what you want to do, right? And a lot of times in some sense, the model is going to generate a plan as an agent and then do it one by one. But a lot of times the model doesn't really have the context. Or of course, the model is getting better over time nowadays with all these coding agents. But still, you need to give the model certain directions about how you want to do the thing in order to have a sort of guidance for the model to align with what you want. So there could be a million ways that you can do things, but you wanted to do it the way that you want. And a lot of times, like engineering, there's always good practices. And then for individual companies or whatever, or individual human beings, you have your own ways or you think it's optimal. So I think it's how you actually sort of interact with the agents and the model these days are some new skills we want the people to learn. But of course, like the solid software engineering ability is still needed if you want to actually not just work on a demo, but a piece of real engineering software that everyone can use is still a huge gap.
Eugene, feel free to tackle that, but I also wonder, I think a lot of people have heard about OpenClaw and Moltbook. If you've heard about either of those, raise your hand so I have a sense of, so again, a lot of people, maybe 56%, 60%. And I've heard a range of thoughts from people in tech from, wow, this is game changing to this is completely ridiculous. And I wonder what people should make of OpenClaw and Moltbook and what you make of it.
I think a lot of stuff in the media, including OpenClaw, shows and like really demonstrates the potential, right, of where the technology could go.
Right.
And traditionally in research, we would like publicize, like cutting edge research that's not production ready by demos, right? But the thing is, like, these demos are now like industrialized and kind of like shown to everyone in the world. And so that's the way I would think about it, right? Because it's shown, there are cases where it can do just amazing things, right? And the potential for automation is there. But the thing is, like, would you use it for yourself, for the things that you actually care about? That might be like a gap, right? And that hesitation is really because there's a lot of questions on when you can trust it, when it will do the thing you want, and when it will not, and the lack of these safeguards, right? So people talk about things like harnesses. But what is a harness, right? It's just another word, unless you actually talk about the technical details of how you're going to actually enforce safety. And so I'm really excited, just like everyone else, about OpenClaw, about the potential, right? It's like showing the future the same way science fiction novels show the future. And I think that's super exciting.
But when you say the word potential, is that also code for the media picks up on whatever and they actually have no idea, and they run with it and they have no idea what they're doing? Which is okay, that's a reasonable approach, thought on this topic.
I think there's a lot of excitement and it's justified. Yeah.
That's an OpenClaw and Moltbook over here.
So OpenClaw has both made my life much better and much worse. Basically, because as you had said, it paints a picture of what agentifying a part of your life can be. It gets people very excited. It also misaligns expectations in many cases about large-scale enterprise deployment.
Right.
But I do think there is still value in painting that picture. Because again, like OpenClaw is one very specific instance of what this kind of agentification or this harness can look like. At Writer, this is the core of our product. So being able to, it's not locally hosted on your Mac Mini, it's cloud-based, it's built into enterprise instances. But again, like internally, it's been fascinating. That got a lot of people internally more experimental. And now I was thinking about this the other day. We have for different customers, it'll go into Salesforce, Gong, Slack, pull out information, create a summary, push it to Slack. But then those summaries are this long. So I have to have my own agent go in and pull from all the different channels and then summarize for me. And I was like, oh my God, this is agent to agent communication. It's happening. But it was all of that got people thinking creatively like this. So still, that's good.
Okay.
But for those large scale enterprise deployments, when people's heads are thinking like that, it's troubling or troublesome. Yeah.
Because of expectations?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I have to say I'm obsessed with the thought of the future of having my OpenClaw agent talk to your OpenClaw agent and talk about all of the fun facts that happened during the week and summarize that for us and push it to a WhatsApp group about this. But is anyone here running their own OpenClaw agent right now? Okay, cool. I love it. Most of my friends that are running them are using it for Sonos, connecting to their Sonos network, using it with their Ring doorbell or some sort of internal communication system within their house. But I mean, with these B2C use cases or consumer use cases, it does help open our minds to what the potential applications are in enterprise deployments. Yes, it does make it seem quite easy, and there's nothing to be concerned about, but from a safety perspective, even using it for your Sonos, the ability for some bad actors to come in and use the Sonos network or use your home Wi-Fi network in order to infiltrate it and potentially do some prompt injecting of some sort and get into, I don't know, turning off your security system. There's certainly a lot of vulnerabilities that exist within these systems that give room for pause. But I am really excited about it, and I think that seeing all of the Malt book, A-to-A communication, starts to expand our minds to what the real potential of A-to-A communication is, which is the enterprise. Businesses being able to talk to each other, efficiencies gained through this really end-to-end seamless communication, hopefully, fingers crossed, seamless. But there's a lot to be excited about by the potential of OpenClaw and having our own personal agents.
Another question from the audience, and this could be for anybody, a couple people can weigh in on it. How do you think about the trade-off between quickly deploying agents in production settings and the time it takes to evaluate them fully, to your point? What are some common practices that are beginning to emerge in industry and academia?
I think industry-wise, I think like quick versus slow is a false dichotomy in the sense of like rather than quickly, where we see industry like players actually getting adoption, succeeding is taking one part of the process, nailing it, building on top of it, and that kind of layering complexity is how we see people actually building a successful end-to-end workflow. So, but it's still moving quick because where we see failure is honestly, I spent a lot of my life at whiteboards, but if you're whiteboarding out processes and that's where you're spending the most of your time, assuming that when you get into the actual building it'll work, it won't. So it has to be about the iterations starting, but then starting with the least complex, like least vulnerable parts of that process and building on that and then layering it on. So I think starting quickly is important, but the idea that you're going to get quickly to the whole end-to-end workflow is not correct.
That's over here. Yeah.
I like to think about two classes of applications of AI. One is kind of like where something is better than nothing, right? It's like if you just do more, it's just strictly better than doing less. This is like content creation, making videos of yourself, right? Or like you just have so many customers that you just need something to service all of them, right? In those cases, like AI is incredible, right? And the technology is to the point where, like one of the members of our lab, Lydia Tilton, like her students have been looking at how you can just like point to a research paper and then reproduce the whole thing, right, with agents. And so, it's at the point where you can point to research papers and adopt it for yourself, right? So if you're in the regime where like you just want to try things and something is better than nothing, it's like an incredible time. I think like if you have like very, very high quality standards or kind of like regulatory standards, there's still a very big gap in terms of like where things are and the research and technology needed to get there.
This is a kind of personal question. We can just go around, but Joe, maybe you can start. With new tools popping up all the time from the audience, how do you as AI leaders manage AI fatigue? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, definitely. I constantly have been reading social medias as well about these kind of new terminologies and different companies are pushing in different kind of tools as well. So to me, so far, I have been trying to set up certain time frames and I just read them. And then really think about, for example, my research direction is on evaluations and testings. So, and then I will have this more of a focus in terms of reading, instead of dragging into all possible social medias out there promoting certain things. And then I think so especially in these kind of very crowded area, you have to really set aside deep thinking time to really drill down deeply from all these kind of like a fluffy media talks, what is really underneath it. Especially, I think I really promote open source code and open source packages, you can actually try what's going on instead of believing people's stories of what it can do and what it cannot do.
Yeah, I think, AI fatigue is definitely real. And, the question, at least, especially in academia, is how to carve out space so that you have the luxury of being able to think and invest in longer term projects, right? Because the competition of lowering the technical bar for doing things is that there's just more competition. And you feel like you're kind of like in a race, right? Either for producing content, consuming content, or just even doing research. And so part of what we've kind of like done, Jill and I and many other faculty, is try to create that space where you're doing work that is not directly competing today for problems right now, but thinking about like, especially the safety that we talked about today, right? Like, what's the infrastructure? What's the longer term kind of research agenda for that? And that's something that gives us time so that the students don't feel like they have to consume all this kind of like content all the time.
It actually seems like something that would be very important in a company too, because instead of worrying about a shiny new object, you're thinking about like a much bigger structure and your own goal versus like all the incoming excitement all the time. But I wonder about the AI fatigue on your end.
Yeah, I think, so again, we see some like very different, very interesting implementations across our customer base in terms of like coming up with like AI champion groups or centers of excellence, or how they roll out experimental software versus kind of like more institutionalized software. So every company is definitely trying to solve this in some kind of way. For me personally, like being curious is more valuable than it has ever been, which is kind of awesome. Like it's like being genuinely curious, trying out as many new things, but also to me, the importance of being able to focus is more important than ever, because AI is incredible at creating mediocre things very easily. It's very difficult to make high quality things. And but establishing that mediocrity very quickly and feeling good about it is not where you want to be. You want to learn how to actually kind of leverage this and understand it and use it to build. And knowing what to focus on out of all the options and all the things, I think becomes more important than ever.
Cal Newport, the computer scientist at Georgetown, has talked about focus, our own focus being an increasingly rare commodity, right? Because we not only...
Social media was nothing for...
Yeah, it is in some ways this super valuable thing that you have, but we don't always put it like to work.
You need to be intrinsically curious, as Ranjan said. You need to carve out your time to learn about this, to actually experiment, to go through, do the videos, watch it. I mean, I myself spend at least 2 hours a day doing research, tool experimentation, building things on my own. And I think that having that passion, having that desire to learn more is what keeps the fatigue down. It's really like anything, fitness fatigue. If you're continually doing it and working on it, you don't feel as tired or as exhausted from all of the incoming news and getting wrapped into the news cycle of it. Oh, this frontier model's doing this, or an agent's been released and messaging someone on their lunch break eating a sandwich, like not getting involved in the actual headlines, but actually reading deeper into what and doing that yourself, not just reading the headlines or the subtitles of it, is doing the research on your own, so you feel as though you're more educated on it. That's the comfort that it brings me.
A final question for the panel, and we can go around again, and you can address it. So this is from the audience. As we push agentic AI toward removing humans from the loop for efficiency, at what point does that become irreversible? How far are we from a scenario where AI systems are making consequential decisions faster than humans can intervene? And are we building the safety guardrails fast enough to prevent that tipping point? Eugene, you want to start?
I mean, computers are already faster than humans by many, many orders of magnitude, right? And people can write code that does the wrong thing and takes down half the internet. Like, all these things kind of exist already today. I guess like maybe the difference with agents is it's done at scale, and I think it's a very scary time, right? I think partly because agents are good enough that they can find vulnerabilities in any piece of software that you point it at. And so I do think it'll be several years before we see kind of like reliable kind of like guarantees of even the simple forms of safety. And I think that the fact that there's so much competition in industry and there's just this constant push to release the next thing, that like there isn't time to invest in these kind of systems problems, because these are not like better model problems. They're kind of like, what's the foundational thing that it's running on, right? The LLM companies, it's not like they've replaced like Linux or the operating system or a database with LLMs. They still rely on core systems components in order to be able to function. And I think the same is going to be needed for not just functioning, but also trustworthiness.
So if you think about it, it's always attack and defend, right? The models are getting better. At the same time, if you have a malicious intent in using model, you're getting better as well. So in every different fronts, you can pretend to be benevolent, but secretly adding different traces in it to do bad things. So I think in some sense, the more the technology advances, the security thing is going to become more and more important as well. And then it's going to be more effort and research to find a way to defend and attack at the same time.
Yeah, I think it is a scary time. It's like a challenging time, but it's also work is going to change. I think the nature, I was thinking about like when I was a kid, I would go to my dad's office and like pick up the mail and take it to the post office for him. That kind of work I don't happen that much very often. It's like the type of work that you are doing, even having managed large marketing teams, like writing a product description is not going to be a thing. Managing a large scale of product descriptions and the process behind it will be a thing. So it's gonna change, and that's, I think, there's gonna be disruption. But I think it's actually, again, safety, security, governance becomes the opportunity. Like Brittany had mentioned, a lot of this is about managing and like creating that governance, creating those safety frameworks, I think. And it's not just cybersecurity professionals who are going to do that. Like business people who know a specific topical area are going to be the best positioned to build the kind of security frameworks and guardrails around that specific process. The same way they do today, just not with agents. So like, I think work is definitely going to change. It's an interesting time and a scary one, but I think there's still, people will have a lot of work to do. We see it internally. We are an AI native company that has been agentifying a lot of our business. And again, there's like some HBR study, like I'm not working less. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but like probably working a little more, but it's exciting. There's more stuff happening, but there's still a lot of work to do.
It's an interesting observation because it goes back, like Elon Musk has talked about people working a lot less so far.
Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay. And Brittany, I just wondered to this question of like, are things going to be moving so fast that decisions are made in a way that, like, are the security guardrails there yet in your view?
I don't think that things are moving fast enough where there's a risk that is absorbent of what the doom and gloom times are. I think that things are moving at a pace, especially in the enterprise space, that's very reliable in terms of the agent output, the evals that we're seeing, the workflows that we're using in my specific space, the FDEs that are on my team that we manage. Just going back to how work is changing, everyone's output has has increased tremendously. Ron, John, and I were talking before we came on about token usage, about this, about creating visibility into how many tokens people are burning, people are using, and this is something that is really fascinating because the more tokens that you're using, the more code that you're deploying, the more work inherently that you're putting out there. I think that the expectations are increasing. The work output, the expectation of the work output is increasing. I don't think that we're seeing any decrease in the work that we're actually doing. Maybe freeing up more time to be able to think, to be able to learn. Those things are certainly advantages that I'm seeing personally, and trying to influence my team in order to take advantage of that as well. One way that we were also talking about this before we came on was using voice AI in order to be more productive, whether it's on the subway, whether it's in the car. No, seriously, Ron, John, and I were talking
Get ready
about this.
for your subway ride later.
Yeah. My friends, I was on my way to go fishing last weekend. My friends and I had this idea of an app that we really wanted to build. So I'm in the car driving, I've got my computer sitting in the passenger seat, and I'm just dictating requirements of the app. And by the end of the 2.5-hour drive, as I'm between the dictation, between talking to my friends on the phone about what we're building, we had a really good product. So I think it's about being as efficient as possible and using the tools that we have at our disposal.
Brittany, Ron, John, Joe, Eugene, thank you so much. This is great.